Berlin, December 1941. Germany is already fighting a continental war on a scale unprecedented in its history. The Wehrmacht has advanced thousands of kilometers into the Soviet Union since June, but the campaign has not ended as planned. Army Group Center has been halted before Moscow. Temperatures have dropped below minus 30 degrees Celsius. Vehicles fail, weapons freeze, casualties mount. The expectation of a short Eastern war has collapsed into a struggle of endurance. On 11 December 1941, Adolf Hitler addresses the Reichstag and declares war on the United States. The decision is not forced by treaty obligations. It is voluntary, ideological, and strategic. Hitler frames the declaration as an inevitable step in a global conflict already underway, linking American economic support for Britain and the Soviet Union to what he sees as an undeclared war. Yet the move opens a confrontation with a power whose material capacity Germany has never directly tested. German assumptions about the United States are shaped by pre-war observation and ideological bias. In 1941, the U.S. Army ranks 17th in the world. Its officer corps has limited experience commanding large formations. Much of its equipment is obsolete or still in development. American society appears divided, with strong isolationist currents and no tradition of mass conscription on a European scale. Hitler and elements of the German leadership interpret these factors as signs of structural weakness rather than temporary conditions. These assumptions ignore the underlying realities of American power. The United States possesses the largest industrial economy in the world, protected by two oceans and untouched by bombing or invasion. Its steel production exceeds that of Germany and its occupied territories combined. Its oil supply is effectively unlimited by wartime standards. Its transportation infrastructure links factories, ports, and training camps across an entire continent. None of these advantages depend on rapid battlefield success to remain intact. German intelligence assessments underestimate the speed at which American industry can be reorganized. Pre-war planning in Berlin assumes that U.S. political divisions will delay full mobilization, that labor disputes and bureaucratic inefficiency will restrict output, and that distance will prevent the sustained deployment of forces overseas. These views are reinforced by racial and ideological beliefs that dismiss American society as materialistic and incapable of disciplined sacrifice. The declaration of war also reflects Hitler's broader strategic pattern. He consistently favors offensive decisions that expand the scope of conflict, rather than consolidating existing fronts. By late 1941, Germany is already committed in North Africa, the Atlantic, the Balkans, and the Soviet Union. Each theater competes for fuel, steel, transport, and manpower. Adding the United States transforms a war of campaigns into a war of production. Within days of the declaration, American political constraints disappear. Congress responds with unanimous approval. Isolationist opposition collapses. The conflict becomes total in scope and duration. What had been an industrial potential now becomes an organized national effort, directed from Washington but executed across thousands of factories, shipyards, and rail hubs. At this moment, no American divisions land in Europe. No fleets appear off German shores. The immediate military balance does not change, but the structure of the war does. Germany has committed itself to a conflict defined not by maneuver or surprise, but by output, replacement, and time. That reality will first reveal itself far from the front lines in the reorganization of American industry during the year that follows. United States, early 1942. The country enters the war with no major armies deployed overseas, but with an economy already shifting towards centralized control. In January, President Franklin D. Roosevelt establishes the War Production Board, granting it authority to allocate raw materials, set production priorities, and halt civilian manufacturing deemed non-essential. Within weeks, automobile production is suspended entirely. Assembly lines in Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago are retooled for tanks, trucks, aircraft engines, and artillery components. The scale of conversion is immediate. Ford's Willow Run plant, still under construction, is designated for mass production of the B-24 Liberator bomber. General Motors divisions begin producing aircraft, machine guns, and armored vehicles. Shipyards on the Atlantic, Gulf, and Pacific coasts adopt standardized designs, allowing Liberty ships to be assembled in sections and launched in weeks rather than months. By mid-1942, the United States is commissioning merchant vessels faster than German U-boats can sink them. Manpower follows production. The selective service system expands rapidly, inducting millions of men for training across newly built camps from Georgia to California. The U.S. Army grows from fewer than 2 million personnel in December 1941 to over 5 million by the end of 1942. Training emphasizes standardization rather than elite specialization, reflecting a doctrine built around replacement, rotation, and sustained operations. Equipment shortages persist early in the year, but output rises faster than planners initially predict. American aircraft production illustrates the shift most clearly. In 1941, the United States produces fewer than 20,000 military aircraft. In 1942, that figure exceeds 47,000. Germany, operating under constant Allied bombing and resource constraints, produces fewer aircraft despite longer mobilization. American factories benefit from uninterrupted power, intact transport networks, and access to raw materials on a continental scale. Losses can be replaced without slowing frontline supply. German leadership observes these developments, but misinterprets their implications. Early Allied defeats in the Philippines, Java, and North Africa reinforced the belief that American forces lack combat effectiveness. The distinction between short-term battlefield outcomes and long-term production trends remains largely unaddressed in German strategic planning. No equivalent effort is made to reorganize the Reich's economy until much later, and even then under fragmented authority. By the end of 1942, the United States has not yet demonstrated decisive battlefield superiority, but the material imbalance is already fixed. Production schedules extend years into the future. Ship tonnage, vehicles, fuel reserves, and aircraft are accumulating faster than they can be deployed. The first sustained test of this industrial momentum will occur not in factories or training camps, but along the sea lanes that connect American output to distant fronts. Atlantic Ocean, 1942. The movement of American power toward the front lines depends on sea control. In the first months after Pearl Harbor, German U-boats exploit this vulnerability. During Operation Paukenschlag, submarines operate close to the American coastline, sinking poorly defended merchant ships from the Caribbean to Newfoundland. Coastal blackouts are inconsistent, convoy systems are incomplete. Losses rise sharply through the spring, reinforcing German confidence that maritime disruption can neutralize American production. That confidence rests on a false equation. German submarine construction and trained crews cannot match the replacement rate emerging from American shipyards. Liberty ships enter service in accelerating numbers, each capable of carrying standardized cargo across the Atlantic. By mid-1942, new escort vessels, including destroyer escorts and corvettes, begin entering service alongside improved coordination between the U.S. Navy, Royal Navy, and Royal Canadian Navy. Convoy discipline tightens. Air coverage expands with long-range patrol aircraft equipped with radar and depth charges. Technology shifts the balance further. High-frequency direction finding, improved sonar, and centralized command centers reduce the effectiveness of wolf-pack tactics. Losses among U-boat crews increase, while operational endurance declines. German naval leadership, constrained by limited shipyard capacity and competing resource demands, cannot adapt at the same pace. Each sunk American vessel is quickly replaced. Each lost submarine represents months of irreplaceable training and construction. In the Pacific, similar logistical patterns emerge. The U.S. Navy repairs battle damage at Pearl Harbor and West Coast yards while expanding its auxiliary fleet. Oilers, transports, and floating repair facilities extend operational reach across vast distances. Unlike Germany, the United States is able to fight a two-ocean war without choosing between theaters, sustaining operations in both the Atlantic and Pacific simultaneously. By late 1942, the Atlantic sea lanes stabilize. American troops, vehicles, and supplies begin crossing in sustained volume. Ports in Britain expand storage and handling capacity, while North African landings demonstrate the feasibility of large-scale amphibious logistics. The war becomes one of throughput rather than access. With supply lines secured and transport capacity assured, American industrial power is now positioned to be applied directly against German forces on land and in the air. Western Europe, 1942 and 1943. With sea lanes increasingly secure, American industrial output begins to appear in the skies over the continent. In the summer of 1942, the U.S. Army Air Forces deploy the 8th Air Force to Britain, operating from airfields under construction across East Anglia. Its mission is defined by daylight precision bombing, intended to strike German industrial capacity while demonstrating sustained American presence in Europe. Initial operations reveal the scale of the task. Early bomber formations of B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators lack long-range fighter escort. Losses are heavy during deep penetrations into occupied Europe and the Reich. German air defenses, built around radar-guided interception, concentrated flak belts, and experienced fighter pilots, exploit these vulnerabilities. Yet the American response differs fundamentally from Germany's. Aircraft losses do not slow operations. Replacement bombers and crews arrive continuously, drawn from an expanding training pipeline supported by uninterrupted production. Throughout 1943, American aircraft output reaches levels unmatched by any belligerent. New bomber groups form faster than airfields can be completed. Engine production, aluminum supply, and fuel availability impose no binding limits. German industry, by contrast, faces increasing strain. Skilled labor is diluted by conscription and forced labor. Fuel shortages restrict pilot training hours. Aircraft production disperses, complicating coordination and reducing efficiency. The introduction of long-range escort fighters alters the balance. By late 1943, P-51 Mustangs equipped with drop tanks accompany bombers to targets deep inside Germany. The Luftwaffe is compelled to engage repeatedly, suffering irreplaceable pilot losses. Fighter strength declines not because aircraft cannot be built, but because trained air crews cannot be replaced at the required rate. American losses remain significant, but they are absorbed within a system designed for attrition. German leadership responds with reactive measures. Flak production increases. Night fighting capabilities are expanded. Emphasis shifts toward defensive interception rather than offensive air operations. Strategic initiatives increasingly rely on future weapons programs rather than immediate operational recovery. None of these measures reverse the cumulative erosion of air superiority. By the end of 1943, German industry continues to function, but under constant pressure. Transportation networks are strained. Repair cycles lengthen. Fuel stocks shrink. The skies are no longer secure. Air superiority has not yet been absolute, but the trend is irreversible. This shifting balance in the air creates the conditions necessary for sustained ground operations on the continent. North Africa, November 1942. When American forces land during Operation Torch, they do so at the end of a logistical chain already extending across the Atlantic. The initial fighting in Algeria and Tunisia exposes weaknesses in command coordination and battlefield experience, but it also reveals a defining structural advantage. Losses in equipment are replaced quickly. Units are reinforced without disrupting supply. Ports, roads, and depots expand behind the front even as combat continues. Through 1943, American ground forces operate within a system designed for endurance rather than decisive maneuver. In Tunisia, U.S. Army units absorb setbacks against experienced German formations, then re-enter the line with improved equipment, revised doctrine, and intact manpower pools. The campaign concludes with the surrender of Axis forces in May 1943, secured not by operational brilliance alone, but by overwhelming sustainment and continuous pressure. In Italy, beginning in September 1943, American and Allied formations confront terrain and defensive systems that limit mobility. Progress is slow. Casualties accumulate. Yet divisions are rotated, rested, and refitted. Artillery ammunition, vehicles, bridging equipment, and medical support remain available in volume. German forces, operating under tightening resource constraints, must hold ground with diminishing reserves and limited replacement capacity. The pattern reaches its fullest expression in France in 1944. The Normandy landings deliver vast quantities of men and materiel ashore within weeks. Artificial harbors, pipeline systems, and captured ports sustain the advance. American divisions fight continuously, but are never allowed to exhaust themselves beyond recovery. Standardized equipment simplifies maintenance. Motor transport ensures operational reach. German formations increasingly lack fuel, transport, and trained replacements. Tactical skill remains, but endurance does not. The imbalance lies not in courage or competence, but in the ability to remain in combat over time. As the front expands and the tempo accelerates, the disparity in sustainment becomes a strategic condition rather than a temporary advantage. Western Europe, mid-1944. The strategic imbalance created over the previous 3 years is now fully exposed. Following the Normandy breakout in July, American forces advance across France with a momentum sustained not by speed alone, but by continuous material flow. Fuel, ammunition, replacement vehicles, and personnel move forward in quantities Germany can no longer counter. The Red Ball Express operates day and night, carrying supplies from the Normandy, beaches, and captured ports to the front lines. The American advance pauses only when logistics dictate, never because production cannot meet demand. Inside the German Reich, conditions move in the opposite direction. Allied bombing has not destroyed industrial output outright, but it has fractured the system that supports it. Rail networks are disrupted. Fuel shortages become decisive. Synthetic fuel plants are targeted repeatedly, reducing availability for both the Luftwaffe and armored formations. Pilot training hours are cut to a fraction of pre-war levels. Armored units receive vehicles without sufficient fuel to maneuver or train. German command decisions reflect this narrowing margin. Hitler rejects elastic defense in favor of holding ground, committing depleted formations to static positions without the reserves required for recovery. In December 1944, the Ardennes offensive is launched in an attempt to regain the initiative. The plan depends on surprise, captured fuel, and rapid collapse of Allied cohesion. None of these conditions endure. American units absorb the shock, fall back where necessary, and then re-establish the line. Supply interruptions are temporary. Reinforcements arrive within days. The offensive exhausts Germany's remaining operational reserves. Tanks are lost faster than they can be replaced. Fuel stocks are consumed without strategic gain. Air support is minimal, constrained by weather and shortages. When the attack stalls, there is no second line to draw from. American production continues without interruption, supporting both the European and Pacific theaters simultaneously. By early 1945, the war's outcome is no longer determined by campaigns or innovation, but by arithmetic. American factories deliver aircraft, vehicles, and munitions on schedules set years earlier. Replacement divisions are trained and equipped before being committed. Medical evacuation and recovery systems return wounded soldiers to service at rates unmatched by any opponent. The United States has built a war structure designed to function indefinitely. Hitler's core misjudgment after 1941 lies here. He assumes that American society lacks the cohesion for prolonged sacrifice, that distance will dilute power, and that material abundance cannot be translated into sustained combat effectiveness. Each assumption proves false. The United States does not seek rapid decision. It applies pressure continuously, allowing time and production to do their work. Germany enters the final months of the war with intact formations and experienced officers, but without the means to continue. The conflict closes not with sudden collapse, but with exhaustion, imposed by an opponent that could replace every loss, correct every failure, and sustain the war as long as necessary.